Today we're going to be changing a wheel bearing, front wheel bearing on this 2007 Chevy Impala. Once you get the wheel off, you can locate both of the caliper bolts located on the back side of the caliper. They are a 15 mil socket. I like to use the impact gun. They come off pretty easy. Once you get the caliper removed, I like to hang it up with a couple bungee cords. It just keeps the stress off the brake line and prevents anything from happening to that. There's usually a couple screws that'll hold on the rotor to the hub. And on this car, there's only one screw. It's a Torx bit. Once you take that off, the rotor should come right off. Once you get the rotor off, you can start by removing the axle nut. You don't want to hit this with a real hammer. I just use a rubber mallet just to tap the axle in a little bit. Once you get the two pinch bolts off for the strut, you'll be able to move everything down and then the axle will slide right out. Keep in mind that these pinch bolts are splined on one side, so you won't be able to put a socket on the other side to spin it out, or you'll wreck the splines. You got to tap it out with a hammer from the opposite side and it'll come right out. Once you got all that stuff out, you'll be able to access the three 13mm bolts that are holding the bearing in from the back side of the hub. You just spin those out and then you'll be ready to remove the bearing. So I got all three bolts out. I was able to get the bearing out. Usually what I'll do is I'll hammer on the hub from where the lug nuts go on the face of the hub, just to break it free from the knuckle. And then once that's off, you'll have to remove the back side of the hub. It sometimes seizes in there, so you'll just have to use a flathead or a pry bar and pick away at it until it comes out. Once it does come out, it's good to clean it up with a little die grinder with a soft cookie to get all the corrosion build up out of there. Make sure the new bearing sits in flush. I also found it was easier just to move the axle out of the way. so I can clean up the corrosion. There was a lot of buildup on this particular vehicle, so it made moving the axle out of the way made it a lot easier to clean it up. So once that's all cleaned up, you're ready to install the new bearing. You always want to match it up to make sure it's the right bearing that you're installing. And you also want to make sure that the one that you ordered has or doesn't have ABS, depending on which vehicle you're working on. Also, don't forget to put back the backing plate like I am right now, but I realized it wasn't on, so I put it back on. Now you can just reinstall the 3 bolts holding the hub together. Make sure they are tight and the hub is sitting flush on the knuckle, and then you're good to assemble everything back how it was. Make sure you torque your axle nut. After you have removed the axle nut, it's good to torque it back to spec. I always like to go over my work at least 3 times to make sure all the bolts are tight and that everything is done properly.